Right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to make a start. So welcome. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the sixth and final overview and scrutiny meeting of this, well, not just the year, actually the whole term. I've got no cake, so no hashtags allowed on Twitter. So those of you, I keep thinking there must be thousands out there on YouTube, but anyway, those of us who watching on YouTube channel. So my name is Councillor Tej Taylor. I'm the chair of this committee, and I have to say, colleagues here and online as well, we thought this might be the final council meeting of the municipal term, but turns out there's a licensing subcommittee on Tuesday morning. So not quite at the very last meeting. So this is a hybrid meeting, and therefore it is taking place both here in the town hall and over Zoom. There are some members operating online, and it's being broadcast, like I said, on YouTube. So those councillors are partaking virtually. Just to remind everybody, those councillors that are not that are attending coaching will not have their attendance officially recorded as present in the minutes. However, their virtual attendance will be noted in the item on apologies for absence and substitution. Just quickly, housekeeping again, especially for those online, the importance of neutral backgrounds. Even if some of you are not coming back again, please just keep your backgrounds neutral. Members, if you can, obviously not just those in the room, but online, just use the chat function or hands up function on your screen, and we'll keep an eye out for any questions. I'd ask those attending online, keep your cameras on, especially if you are, once you are speaking, but keep your microphones off unless you're about to speak. Okay, we've got 3 items tonight to discuss in terms of the order of agenda, but there is a change around in the order. But just to remind, 3 items. We're talking about economic growth in the borough, the report of the recent Ofsted visit, and the final item, the proposed structure for overview and scrutiny, and the scrutiny panels for next year. All the papers are available online on Council's website if you want to read or follow what we're discussing. As I just indicated, I'm going to take the Ofsted report as the first item tonight. So there was a change in the running order. So with that out the way, we'll get on to the main proceedings before we get on to the Ofsted report. I know you anticipated. Formalities first. So apologies for absence, substitute. I'm just going to go through a list of names. Just say yes if you're here, please, or present. Councillor Louise Brett.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Driscoll. Present. Councillor Seema Kumar. Present. Yeah. Councillor Miriam Rice. Present. Councillor Sarah Rooney. Present. Councillor Chris Summers has given his apologies. Councillor Simon Woodworth. Councillor Anthony Young. Present. Councillor John Ball. Present. Councillor Faye Block. Yep. Councillor Jessica Chohan. Don't know. Councillor Praveen Anand. Was he there? Heard something. Okay. Yeah, probably on the streets. Councillor Sitara Anjum.
Yes, I'm present.
Thank you. And Councillor Dan Crawford.
I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any declarations of interest? Anybody? No. And there's no urgent matter to discuss tonight. And there's no matters to be considered in private. Okay, first item, like I said, change the order. It's item 6 that is on your agenda. It's the Ofsted focused visit from November 2021. Presenting this item will be Caroline Fair, who's the Director of Children and Families, and her colleagues. I don't know your job title, sorry, but I've got Carol Yates and John Churchill. I think, to be fair, we had hoped to hear from some young people on this item, but I think in fairness, due to safeguarding concerns, we decided against doing so. So I think there's going to be a presentation first of all, and then we'll take questions at the end. Thank you.
Evening, colleagues. For some of you, this is going to be quite familiar material. I can see some of our corporate parent colleagues here, so bear with me. The presentation is going to cover the the focus visit as well, which was an overwhelming success back in November 2021. What we wanted to do is take the opportunity to step you through what might be the role and the influence that you as members can play in terms of corporate parenting responsibility. So I'm not going to step through all 18 slides in detail, be pleased to know, but I want to focus in on some core areas. If I can move this on, that'd be good. I know it's not doing it. Apologies. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's now working. Okay, just as a reminder, I'm not, for some of you, as I say, that you'll be familiar with this, but as local authorities, we have a really unique responsibility for the children that we look after and care leavers. This is often referred to as being a corporate parent. Essentially, these are our children, and we have a responsibility to champion them. And it's an incredibly important part of the regulators framework. So it's something that Ofsted look at every time that they come in to either do a general graded inspection or, as they did in November, a focus visit on our care leaver service. We also entertain external scrutiny anyway as part of ensuring that we are continuing to focus on high standards and improvement. The focus visit happened in November 2021, and it looked at our progress since our inspection in 2019, and it endorsed what we had been doing, so it was overwhelmingly positive. So tonight's purpose is really to give you a sense of the progress to date, and also a bit of a way of exploring what you might do to champion the children who are your children as corporate parents. So the vision for our work is one that we crafted in partnership with our young people, and they had a very simple ask, really. They wanted us to stand alongside them. They wanted us to support them, advocate on their behalf, allow them to take the lead in certain aspects in their life, and really listen to what they had to say and what they need from us and how we respond to that. So quite simple, and say, therefore, is our vision, but really important to get right. So who are we looking after? We have got 330 looked after children aged between 0 and 17. These are the end of March figures, so very current. And 409 care leavers aged between 16 and 25. So 739 children and young people. That's not a small number. More boys than girls, driven really by our US population. We have 48 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, all of whom are male. So that drives quite a lot of that demographic, and also means we have an older population, which is why we have a large cohort of 16 to 25-year-olds. So the graph that you see on the right-hand side tells you where they are all living. In the main, they are in fostering, either independent or in-house, but we also have high numbers in semi-independent accommodation, which is where we get them ready for independence and adulthood. So that's a snapshot of the enormity of the responsibilities that we have as corporate parents. And then importantly, how are we doing in delivering those responsibilities? This is a snapshot of some of the key performance indicators that we measure week by week, month by month, and are what Ofsted will be particularly interested in. And I'm proud of these figures. We're performing really, really strongly. You can see we're in the 90s, and 83% for our young people in education, employment or training age between 17 and 18. That is exceptional. 63% for 19 to 21-year-olds, again, way above what our neighbouring boroughs are doing. 17% at university, that's one of the best figures in the country. So these are figures to be proud of. But takes some maintaining and means that we have to keep that ambition going. And it does inevitably mean that there are asks of the broader corporate parent partnership. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but what we will pick up in a bit is some of the key bits we need to focus on. But we've made a number of steps against some of the recommendations that came both out of Ofsted, but also more substantially from the visit from the DfE that we had 2 weeks prior to Ofsted. So we had a busy period last year, both in terms of how we work jointly with housing as examples, or with our adults colleagues around transition. There's an awful lot of work being done around how we work with our young people around pathway planning, getting them ready for independence. So this is just a snapshot slide that shows what we've been working on over the last 6 months. So what really is corporate parenting? As I say, it's probably the most important thing that we do as council officers and members for our looked after children and young people. And it centres really around one key question: would this be good enough for my child? It really has to be what governs what we do and how we do it. And that ethos means that any vision or responsibility we have towards our looked after children and care leavers is the priority for everybody in the organisation, not just Carol, John, me, Judith, the social workers, but genuinely everybody in the organisation. And there are two bits. They are children who need the same as your children. They need love, they need stability, they need a safe place. But because of their start, they also need that space to become more resilient, to recover from their experiences, and to put them on a steady platform going forward. So corporate parenting principles are what they really define what we do for all of our children, whether they are care leavers, so aged over 16, or looked after children. There's 7 key principles that the Department for Education set out. None of them will be surprising to you, and they are, of course, I expect, what you would be thinking about when you're thinking about your own children. But we have a duty to act in the best interests, to promote their physical, mental health and well-being, to encourage them to achieve, to listen to them and take into account what they feel, what their wishes and feelings are, and to be ambitious for them and give them the opportunities and the platform to meet their own ambitions and make sure that they're ready to be independent, successful, contributing adults. So one of the things that we like to think about is what does that mean? How do we apply them? Now, I referenced before, it's really important that the leadership challenges and holds us account at all levels, and really thinks about the quality of the services that we're providing. So there's a need for us to make sure that we are sharing the sorts of figures that you see regularly and readily across the organisation. One of the things we use to make sure that we're doing that is our corporate parenting board, and we've got some of the members here. Now that is something that we were criticised about by Ofsted and indeed by the DfE, not in any profound way, but what they did describe it as was overly bureaucratic and turgid, which means that for our young people, it wasn't particularly engaging or exciting. So the challenge has been for us to think about how we reshape that, and I'll talk to you a bit about what we're doing with that. And then the other bit, of course, is what our young people tell us about the services they receive. That is probably the most important measure that we have about how we're doing. And it's really important, therefore, that we have mechanisms that enable us to take that feedback and use it and make sure that we have that circle that then goes back to the young people. So on the right-hand side of the slide are just some of the questions that we as corporate parents may ask. I'm not going to go through them. You have the presentation and you can see what they are. But again, none of them will be surprising to you. And they're the sorts of things we would ask as parents for our own children, you know, about what they want to do, how they want to do it, how we support them to achieve those ambitions. I referenced Mark Riddell. He's the advisor for care leavers, national advisor for care leavers, and a care experienced man himself. And he visited us 2 weeks before our October focus visit. He made 14 recommendations that he said would take us to outstanding. So recommendations that weren't about what we needed to do to make sure that we were meeting standard, but recommendations that would take us that extra mile to be something unique and special. And then on the right, just briefly, feedback from the focus visit. You will have all read the report in your pack. It was a strong endorsement of the work that we have done as an organisation, as members, and as frontline officers. So this is where I'm not going to go through all 14, you'll be pleased to say, but I want to just focus in on a couple where we might have some asks of you as members, as elected members. He encouraged us to look at how we deal with corporate parenting. So we are in the early stages of what we call the champion model approach, and I'll show you a slide in a bit that sets out what that looks like. We had our first stab at that on the 24th of March, and for those of you who were there, I think it felt fundamentally different. It was absolutely about young people. They sat with us, they helped us have the conversation and the discussion, they challenged us, and I think that is for us what we want to do going forward. So it feels like a really good starting point. And the other thing we want to look at is how we develop a whole council offer for our young people. And that means, what are you as elected members going to do? What are officers across all parts of the organisation going to do as a corporate parent when it comes to looking after our children and young people? So again, very, very exciting, I think. And we will be taking a step in September of this year with a conference with our Safeguarding Partnership, which includes partners from education, from health, from police, from the voluntary sector. And we'll be thinking together again about what that offer is for our young people in Ealing. The other thing that we talked about before, and we talked about it when I had the opportunity to meet with Cabinet back in November, I think, last year, is what we might do to profile elected members so that we can think about who it is our interested members are, what they can offer to our young people, what they do when they're not here doing council business. So there's an opportunity to think about what that looks like and what you as elected members might do with our care leavers. So it might be a shadowing opportunity, it might be an opportunity to do a bit of sort of work experience. You know, there are a range of things that are possible. So we wanted to think about you and as corporate parents in that regard. And the other thing that is really, really important is how we look at setting a target for ring-fenced opportunities across the council. So I guess what I'm trying to do here is set out what might be some of the recommendations that we take away from the scrutiny panel. We want to think about how we take the opportunities that are available across the council and make care leavers a priority for those opportunities. Now, I know it needs thinking through and we want to make sure there's a range available, but if we genuinely are parents, and this is a family business, we have a raft of young people who would jump at the opportunity. So there's something for us to think about in terms of how we might make that a reality for care leavers in Ealing. Simple things that I think they're simple to me, they're simple to Carol, but they've been unusually hard to action over the years. Something like a leisure pass for all care leavers. We've talked about that for many years, but it's extraordinarily hard to get done right. So I guess that's one of the things I'd be interested to see what we might be able to do together. It's a simple thing that makes a big difference to young people. You'll notice I'm skipping over a few. There are a few that we will do regardless, but I'm thinking about how you might offer influence as elected members. And the other bit for me, again, where we have an opportunity to probably enter the 21st century is the digital offer. I think we're not always as, I would say, ahead of the game as we could be. And that is something for our young people that they would really value, a better digital platform from which they can communicate with us, understand what their rights are, understand what the offer is. So again, possibly something that as elected members you might be able to influence in terms of recommendations. So we've talked a bit about this, but there's something for me about how we as senior leaders and councillors champion corporate parenting. And it could be, as I've said, promoting the idea that they are our children and part of our family. It's about making sure that the members of our children in care councils have access to all of you in whatever format that we think works best. And that'll be part of what we think about at corporate parenting. It's making sure that as senior officers and councillors, we consistently demonstrate what care means for looked after children. So, you know, that could be visiting children and care leavers who are living outside of the local authority. Now, we do that as social workers, but there may be things that we want to do differently in terms of elected members, as an example. They are your children too. Why don't we make that an opportunity? So it's something for us to think about. And then, as I said before, being able to demonstrate that we've changed services as a result of something that our young people have asked or told us or done a piece of work on. And we have done that in Ealing. On the right-hand side, there are examples of authorities where they've done something different, something exciting. And we're on that list because we were one of the early councils in terms of council tax exemption for all care leavers up to the age of 25, whether they're living here or outside of the authority. So there's no distinction, and that is something to be proud of and makes a difference to our young people. This is what we're talking about in terms of our new approach to corporate parenting. So we've had our first stab at it. The next meeting is in July. We're focusing in that meeting on housing, which many of you will know is probably the single biggest thing that bothers our young people, is where they're going to live when they leave care. So we're going to have our first themed discussion in July on housing, and that will involve a meeting in June with young people, relevant key cabinet members and officers as a roundtable discussion, and they will then take recommendations and challenges to corporate parenting panel, where again we will engage in discussion with young people in July. And from that, recommendations will come out, and those recommendations will be tracked by corporate parent panel and by cabinet and elected members as part of their corporate parenting responsibilities more generally. So an exciting new approach, I think, but we will test it and make sure that it's working for our young people. So really for tonight, as an organisation, if we are a family business, what is our offer? Just with partners, which is a broader discussion, but with the council. And what are the key portfolio areas who can provide those opportunities? And we've got Councillor Munro here, who's been a champion of how we provide housing and how we think about that as part of the development, of which there's an enormous amount in Ealing. But there are other things, work experience, our apprenticeship schemes. What is it that we can do together to give them opportunity? And within that, what are the policies that we have organisationally where we need to make really clear intentions around care leavers as priorities? Thinking about housing. Not easy. We know that there are a myriad of challenges around homelessness and how we make sure we meet responsibilities, but how do we make sure that care leavers are a priority in that? So questions really, and an opportunity to think together about what other ideas you might have. That's me.
Thank you, Carolyn. Did your colleagues want to add anything as well?
Anything?
Just take questions. No. All right. Questions, anybody? Okay. I'll take Sarah and then I'll take John Ball.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. So the Welsh Government recently announced that they were going to start a trial programme to pay young people leaving care, I think it's £1,600 a month, basic income for 2 years. Is that something that we could write to the government and see if we could, as a council, put pressure on the government to apply in England and maybe do a trial in Ealing Council? So that's just one suggestion, is that we follow that up with the government. The other one was around apprenticeships. Could we have a certain number of apprenticeships that are specifically for care leavers to kind of provide those opportunities? Thank you.
Both are. I mean, you would be pushing against an open door if it was a decision for us to make, but yes, I think both are very interesting. I might invite Carol just to give you a bit of a sense of the sort of financial support we offer our care leavers. But yes, I would clearly be supportive of a recommendation on both of those.
Hello there. Yeah, we do have a really good financial package for care leavers. I think the current economic climate means that we're seeing that some of our care leavers are struggling. So I am kind of open to looking at what options we have available to us to sort of like give young people that additional amount so they're not anxious and not making really difficult choices. For those young people who are NEET, not in education and employment, they're living on normally around, I think the new cost is about £60 a week. For some of our service providers, they've upped the contribution from care leavers to about £30 a week. So they might get some meals from that. In others, it's £20 and they get no meals for that, and still have bills to pay in some of those places. So it's a real pressure, and young people are really anxious about it. So we're already on a case-by-case basis helping young people. So I suppose I'm just saying I'm really, really interested in the 1,600 that, you know, that may be paid. It's a lot of money, and I wouldn't. My one concern about that would be that it didn't actually incentivize young people to perhaps get into employment and to improve their position. So that's my only doubt on it. So I'm very interested to see how that pans out, and I wouldn't mind having a visit at some point to see how that's working for people. We do have a good offer. It could always be improved. So, you know, we have the 5,500 a year for those young people at university, and that goes on through their degree. And if they do a master's or a PhD, we do it to £5,000 a year. There's really good support there. At the moment, we're funding things like glasses, dentists, any private work that needs doing. I think when Mark Riddell came, his wish was that health would provide some of that. And in our recent discussions with health as corporate parent, they're certainly looking to help us get a specialist nurse for care leavers, 18, which would be fantastic, 18 to 25, to join our LAC nurse team. I think in terms of the apprenticeships, we're doing some work around that at the moment. We know that I think what we're getting back from different departments is they're not able to provide an apprenticeship that's ring-fenced to care leavers. We'd like to push back a bit there and see. I don't think I think at least if every care leaver could have an interview, that would be some way forward in putting our young people first and ensuring that they're not put into jobs that they're not ready for. So we do want them to be able to understand the world as they move on as well. But yeah, I don't know if that's helpful.
So in terms of the recommendations, there were a couple that sound like perhaps they might be kind of potential for easy wins. They might be a bit easier than some of them. So the leisure pass was one which does sound like something that a decision could fairly easily be made, one would have thought. And then the other one was the digital offer, which is a little bit more complicated, but it's still, it's a kind of decision, ultimately a decision to spend some money rather than, the more complicated interrelationships with the others. So I don't know if you've got anything to say about whether either of those are more complicated than they appear. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about was within the inspection letter, there was a comment about a disconnect between adult services and care leavers, only getting one opportunity to engage, and if they missed it, in tough luck kind of thing. Is anything being done to address that particular aspect? Yeah.
So I'll pick up your last point first. Yes, we are working very closely with adults colleagues, and actually that's one of the things I think that Carol would say is much better. We have a transitions group that meets to make sure, and I think we addressed that particular point almost immediately. So I'm comfortable and confident that is something that's been easily influenced, and one that we have a strong relationship across directorate to make sure that we respond to bits as they come up when they're needed. So I'm comfortable with that. On the leisure pass bit, what I would say is it speaks to our collective corporate parenting responsibilities. And those are the sorts of things that I would be looking to colleagues, for Chris Bunting, for example, to say, you know, what might we do around a leisure pass for all care leavers? It's that collective corporate parenting responsibility. I could say that I would pay for a leisure pass for every single care leaver out of my budget, rather misses the point.
It's that recommendation.
Sorry, I was just going to say about the digital offer. We're working with the head of safeguarding and our manager of the Horizons Drop-In Centre for Care Leavers at the moment to look at that offer. I don't think it needs to cost a fortune, but I do think it would be a great opportunity. The young people are saying one of the platforms they want is Instagram, because it's so instant. I'm a bit of a dinosaur when it comes to that, so I'm not doing the lead part on that. But it does mean that they can get instant information, and we're working with the comms department to get that delivered safely. But I would love, if we were to have a website, we kind of need someone who could keep that website up to date and alive and real for young people. I'd love to make that an apprenticeship, ring-fenced apprenticeship opportunity that's for a care leaver to run that website. So that's my idea. I just don't have the money at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested in, because you said you've got a meeting coming up talking about housing. I know it's something that's come up in previous OSC and also previous scrutiny panel that I was subbing on and talking about that. And it's just a huge issue in terms of sometimes you feel like you want to promise again they're going to get a decent place to live, but of course you can't meet that promise, and maybe it feels like other boroughs are doing so, and it's just really quite heartbreaking, really. But then one thing I did think about at the time and did mention is that you get co-living developments, and is it possible that when something like that gets set up, is it possible that the council could say that we have to reserve a certain number of rooms for the care leavers? And I don't know, I mean, I'm sure I've heard something mentioned somewhere along the line that sometimes when we're looking at housing developments that we are trying to reserve some space for the care leavers. So I'm wondering what kind of progress we're making on that. And also, I mean, you're talking about love. Now, this really does interest me, is how we're providing the love that a child in a normal circumstance would have. I mean, you know, is it through maybe foster care? I mean, is there some kind of environment that we're actually providing where maybe a number of children in care are actually together and able to look after each other, especially if you've got unaccompanied children? I mean, how does that go? They haven't even got like an extended family to go to. And then from love comes the kind of experiences that a lot of us have that really form us in terms of, even if it's just going to the beach, even if it's just going to the countryside, maybe getting to see the sheep in the field. I mean, how do we have those normal experiences when you're in care that the rest of us have, and actually just develop us as people? Thank you.
I'll get Carol to pick up on the housing update, but we have made significant progress there, although there is more to do. On your point about love, it's obviously a more complex thing for our looked after children care leavers, but they are in placements that meet need. Relationships is the core part of our practice model, and Carol has a team of staff who are completely and utterly committed to the young people that they work with, and those relationships are incredibly important. We also have, clinical psychology support for our unaccompanied young people in particular. So we have a range of things that are in place to try and make sure that we meet needs of sometimes very complex, very traumatized young people. And I think we do okay. But there's always more to do, and it's one of the things that we talk about as a senior management group a lot, to make sure that we are plugging holes wherever we can to meet need. And some of our young people do live together as part of that forming relationships. But Carol will talk a bit quickly about housing offer.
And you raise really, really good points, I think, and that relational work, as Carolyn says, is key to everything that we're doing. Some of our young people who are unaccompanied asylum seekers were ready to live alone, but couldn't because they can't claim benefits and can't hold a tenancy because they don't have status. So as a joint project with housing, we set up two residencies really where people can live. I think it's 6 in one household and 7 in another, in a really supportive shared budget kind of way, and that's worked really well. We've had some hiccups, but it has worked well. We've been lucky enough to have a grant-funded outreach post for a year to work specifically on the emotional health of our unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people. And she has been doing the most incredible outreach work and developed really strong relationships. And so I think our young people would say that they get the love, if you like, is more about someone to be there, someone to listen when they need help, and that we're really responsive. And that's how we try to do that. We've actually had 67 young people get their own tenancy, 62, I beg your pardon, young people get their tenancies in the last year. It's in the report here. I won't bother going through, but it's something like, I think it's 35 private rented, and whatever the remainder of that is for social housing. And that's been fantastic. We're so grateful for that social housing, because that's what our young people really want, that security, because they haven't had that. And they don't have family to return to in the same way. And one of my big pleas would be that it's because they've been seen as a priority within any housing policy to date that that has worked. And I fear any policy that doesn't have them as a priority group anymore.
What I would say, though, is that we have worked closely with colleagues in place and with cabinet members for place as well, to make sure that we're taking every opportunity, and that's an ongoing conversation, which leaves me hopeful about how we might prioritise young people as part of any developments.
Sorry, can you, I know we had discussion just for the start of the meeting. Roughly how many tenancies are required each year? You said 67 the last year.
It's an average of 60 per year. We'd fallen slightly behind in previous years, but it's an average of 60 a year.
Because I'm a member of corporate parents, so the last meeting when we were talking about this championship model, I think there's a real enthusiasm both from officers and from looked after children. There really was an enthusiasm for giving it a go and having a try. And there was also that reality that, you know, it's something very different and new. My concern is for some of the issues, like the housing one, is we have a very finite supply that we can offer as a council in terms of social housing, that we don't want to disappoint, we don't want to let down, we don't want to give false hope. So while we're engaging and bringing people in and want that discussion and to meet needs, we don't want to set false promises either. So how are we going to manage these very difficult, you know, long-term issues? Some of them are not quite are more achievable in some of those themes, but how are we going to make sure that the looked after children feel like they are listened to and that things are taken seriously, but the achievement timeline might not be immediately as they want to see? So how are we going to sort of handle that?
One of the things that is always, for me, really important to hold in mind is that our young people aren't asking for miracles. What they're asking for is transparency. And this is, for me, the nub of it. We have been very clear with them over the last couple of years about some of those challenges. We work very hard to make sure that there are some young people who are better able to manage private tenancies, so we support them into private tenancies. So it's about, for me, the transparency and making sure that we don't hide the realities with them, but we engage with conversations about what it might look like in a year's time, in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, and what the realities are, and also what the opportunities are for them with support from us to look at other alternatives. So for me, it's the honesty of the conversation rather than a promise to produce miracles, which of course we can't. Is that fair, Carol?
I wasn't going to speak on this because I came for another one, but Cabinet did meet and we had a very long session around this champion model, and each of the portfolios was tasked with looking at what we could offer to the looked after children. And one of the first ones is around us. People may be aware we're looking to purchase some homes in Acton, 31 homes. And out of them, there's 50 for temporary accommodation. But out of that, there's 15 one-bedrooms, which temporary accommodation can use, but the report indicates that we would want to allocate those 15 one-bedroom homes to look after children on a long-term basis. So it's that kind of looking at the whole of the different portfolios. Cabinet was looking, each of the Cabinet portfolio holders were looking at their area of work to see where we could actually tilt policy towards being a corporate parent. And that's one of the first reports going through Cabinet now at the moment, where we're hoping to allocate those 15 one-bedroom brand new homes to looked after children being placed into them as they leave care, because that's a key transition moment when it's a real difficulty in terms of how can they get independent lives. And that's just one issue. So the Cabinet has been looking at it, and we will come back with more stuff, but it really is important. We're all corporate parents, and that was the reality of this focused visit. It's just not the corporate parent committee. Every one of us has a responsibility to make sure that we provide services which are tailored to children who haven't had the benefits. My girls have had the benefits of parents looking after them, paying for their university education, helping them buy a home and all the rest of it. These young people don't have that. And so we need to be the second best thing. We can't be, I don't think we can ever be like normal parents in that sense. We can't give all of that, but we need to give as much as we can to make sure that they settle into adult life and contribute to our community and are settled and are actually able to contribute. And that's the reality. And it is difficult. I'm not saying it's because some of the young people are traumatized. I mean, I was on the adoption panel for many years, and I'm aware of the kind of problems that some of our young people have, but we have to manage those and support them best we can. But there are other young people who can be independent, go to university and do really well, and we need to support them as well. So that's just one of the examples where those 15 homes hopefully will be set aside for looked after children who are leaving and want independent lives moving forward.
Thank you. After Simon, I've got Councillor Crawford, and that's the last question I'm going to take after Councillor Crawford. So next up was Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again, Carolyn, for the very comprehensive. I know that your reports are usually very open, honest, and through the scrutiny panel that we sat on, and I've seen that, in the report, there is progress on that. The 42 USC children, I mean, we've touched base on that along the conversation that's taken place. The challenge, I mean, you must be facing challenges, but is language one of the bigger challenges? And how is it that we can help? I mean, I know even if we are not on the corporate panel, and what Councillor Monroe has said, we can all play a part in that. Would that be something that could be, a recommendation? Because, several of us speak different languages, and I noticed that there's Asian, Arabs, and Africans. The majority of them are from that ethnic background. So I thought that would be quite important, because from what I've seen, even with adults, that is an issue, and you don't understand, and you don't have the confidence of asking. That can be, and you just withdraw, and that can in itself is a problem. I'm really happy to see that you using the STQ to assess children's mental health, because that was one of the things we'd talked about in a previous scrutiny panel. So I think I will probably say that that's what I would be asking. And, how can we help? So if there is an opening and if something is put forward, it'd be really very good. And thank you for identifying the acronyms.
I think you're absolutely right. Language is a key issue for our young people. We use translation services. We have some staff who speak different languages, but I think if there was an offer and availability, it would take up. We have seen a huge increase in numbers of unaccompanied young people this year, 200% compared to last year. We went up to as high as 54 at, I think it was about 4 months ago. They come very close to 18, so they turn 18 very quickly, and then they drop off the numbers you see here, but they are part of our care leaver population. And I think something like half of our care leavers are unaccompanied young people. So an absolute need, no question.
Thank you, Chair. It's an incredibly important issue. Just thinking of it, I was a councillor in the 90s when we got absolutely slammed by the government then. I mean, it was appalling. We were taken right over the coals, quite rightly, really. And we set up a corporate committee, which I was on for a while there. I remember showing a government minister around one of our children's homes at the time. And then later on, not after, we discovered quite a lot of other councils were in the same problem, but at the time we thought we were the only one. So everything got built up and we put a lot into it, and it was kind of disappointing when here we're getting criticised again. I think it's hugely important that we don't take our eye off the ball in future. I think these are all very positive, very positive stuff, and there are issues about nobody can sort of say, have you done your homework tonight? Or if somebody has an immediate personal crisis when they need somebody to put an arm around them, I think things like that are real problems. But I think it's terribly important. And this being my last council meeting, I just want to say that I've been around, and I just want to say this council should never take its eye off the ball again, because I think this is just a hugely important part of our activity.
Thank you, Simon. If it's the last word you say, then thank you. All right, Councillor Daniel Crawford is online.
Be off mute for a second. Thank you, Chair. I'm putting on my camera. Last time I did this, it crashed my computer, so I hope I'm still with you. Just a couple of points. Councillor Manro rather stole my thunder with regards to accommodation in Acton. I know we're trying to do that, and it's worth pointing out as well just how strong a supporter Councillor Manro has been of first adoption and then corporate parent over a long period of time, certainly the 12 years that I've been on the council. Just a couple of points on the sort of recommendations angle that we're talking about. I'm struck by the need to do some more in our communications and some of the earlier discussion around that for the care leavers. It occurs to me that we have a lot of media organisations within the borough, as well as education facilities. I would imagine that the BBC, Sky and other media providers would be more than willing to engage in some training and support for our care leavers and young people. And those connections could easily be forged, as well as with our further education colleges and universities. That would be quite easy. I'm happy to have any conversations that need to take place between elected members and everyone active in terms of the Acton offer for care leavers. I know we had to do some negotiations around membership rates for Acton residents when that centre opened. and I'm sure it's on the radar of Cabinet. But I'd also recognise and endorse the comments of Councillor Woodruff that he's just made. I know that Caroline and Judith and a lot of the other officers do work so hard to get this right, and it's very important, but we absolutely shouldn't take our eye off this area, and we should be looking to innovate where we can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crawford. I would be very interested in anything that helps facilitate some conversations with the likes of BBC and Sky around training and apprentice opportunities. We have very good relationships and connections with schools and colleges and universities. So I think we have enough there, but I'm very interested indeed in terms of media opportunity.
Thank you, Carolyn. All right. Thank you for that. Good range of questions. I've learned quite a bit tonight as well, in fairness. Quite a lot. Just a couple of quick things. You mentioned the councillor, elected members' profile. And I know post-election, some of you may not be here, of course, but well, some are standing down, just to be clear. I mean, but it's because there's a training event lined up. That might be an opportune moment to talk about that and what we think about how that might shape up in terms of commitment. I remember London 2012, and I can't remember which way around it was. It was either looked after children. Did we take some to the Olympics?
We did.
So women's Euro 22 is coming up. You know, Brentford Football Club tickets. So maybe have a look there as well. Possible. You know, summer exertions. That's for football fans, anyone's interested. So, and the other thing was the issue about the apprentices, how we might want to explore that further as well, how that might materialise in terms of, I think at least you talked about minimum being on the shortlist, I think is what you said. So if as a priority, it doesn't mean a guarantee that they'll have the job, but at least explore that option. So that, and apart from that bit and the option plus the tickets and football, are we happy to take the recommendations, which is to largely note the report in addition to those bits?
Could I come back with something I forgot?
Okay, don't be long.
No, it was just there was a discussion about health from the officers, and I'm happy to have a discussion with regards to what we can take to JOSC or what we can take to the West London NHS with regards to increased health provision and participation in any ongoing work. But I'll take that up offline with Caroline and Judith and Carol and anyone else. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're happy to note that report. So thank you, Carol and John. So you are now free to leave. Okay. Right, as they leave, I'm going to go to the next item. So back onto item 5 on your agenda, which is economic growth in the borough. Now, the reason we obviously looked at the agenda earlier in the year, the reason taking this item is to understand some of the work that's underway after the pandemic, and of course in light of the cost of living crisis. And I know, hopefully, I think this one of the scrutiny panels next year, we'll look at this in more detail next year, but given where we are in a municipal cycle, I think we're keen to avoid an overly long report. And I think the officer who's online tonight, Conor, will be presenting that. But we've also got the Cabinet Member for Good Grove, Chantal Manro, here tonight. Did you want to say a quick few words?
Well, all I was going to say is next year and the new term will be a key moment for the future of Ealing in the next 20 odd years. We will be looking at bringing out the new local plan for Ealing, which really will help shape the borough for the next 20 years around jobs, employment space, leisure facilities, you name it. The local plan will cover every area of life, health services, GP surgeries, all those issues will be covered as part of the local plan. So there will be a number of reports which are being now produced, which colleagues will be able to share in terms of health facilities, leisure facilities. I mean, there's so many different reports that I look at, which will be coming through as part of the local plan and the evidence base as to how we want the borough to develop over the next 15 to 20 years, economic regeneration, house building, business development, business growth, jobs. So Conor, this is just looking at a little bit around the plan for good jobs, but there is a bigger piece of work that will need to be done next year. The work is ongoing in terms of the reports coming forward, industrial sealing. There's a lot of work going on. So I don't really want to go into details, but I think I'll let Conor introduce this bit. And then if people have questions, and then we can move forward, hopefully next year, to look at it in detail, and OSC can have further reports on different parts of the local plan. I would hope you do it in chapters rather than in one whole go, because it's a really big sort of plan. Okay.
Oh, wrong button. So online, I think that's not him on screen, is it? It's Conor Mcdonough, who's the is the Assistant Director for Economic Growth. Conor, over to you.
Conor needs to unmute himself.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
That's good. It was muted for some reason. Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Monroe, for that introduction. Yeah, my name's Conor Mcdonough, Assistant Director for Economic Growth. And yeah, part of that job description includes how we look after economy and how we've been rebuilding and regrowing our economy as a result of COVID-19 in particular, but other macroeconomic impacts that are ongoing as well. So as Councillor Monroe said, a lot to be done in this area, and we've got many different levers that we can work with to improve the economy. I'm going to talk about some of those tonight through a short presentation, and then happy to take some questions at the end of that. So what hopefully you can see the presentation. I'm going to just describe this photograph that you're looking at first and foremost. So what you can see here is a chap working in Brompton's bicycle factory in Greenford, a really important business in Ealing, currently employing I think 700 people in Greenford in this factory, with plans to expand by another couple of hundred employees over the next couple of years. So the council is working very hard with businesses like this to ensure that they're happy within the borough, and we're providing as much support to them as they want from us, and vice versa, how they can actually support the council as well. And part of that would overlap with some of the discussion you were having with Carlin earlier in terms of how we can support young people into jobs within Ealing, particularly those people from most vulnerable or disadvantaged backgrounds as well. So there's lots of interdependencies on that. So I'll just move on to the next slide. Okay, this slide here, you may have seen this image before, but what this is saying is that large parts of Ealing are quite deprived. So the darker red areas indicate more deprivation, and then the lighter colored areas, like the pink areas, are less deprived areas. And this is taken from something called the Indices of Multiple Deprivation. And this is a whole plethora of data that the government collects and combines and collates, and then they produce a document which brings this together. And this is the map of Ealing. You can see that the west of the borough, so places like Southall, Northholt, or one of our more deprived regions, or two of our most deprived regions. And then on the right in Acton, you see there's quite a lot of pockets of deprivation there as well. So obviously it's not good that there's so much red on this, and this data is actually from 2019. So since COVID came, some of these red areas will actually be more red than they are at the moment. So this is something that we're working with and trying to mitigate. I should also mention as well, a colleague of mine, a lady called Angela McKeever, she's the AD for Employment and Skills. She would normally be joining me for this type of discussion tonight, but she's on leave at the moment. But she's playing a big role alongside me, particularly from the employment and skills, adult education side of things and the apprenticeship side of things, which she manages. I'm more the sort of business and local economy sort of officer. But yeah, this is pre-pandemic inequality. So we already knew we needed a plan for good jobs at that stage. So back in 2019, we knew we needed a plan to come together to help our local economy, because these were pre-COVID inequalities. So moving on, hopefully you've had a chance to read the plan for good jobs. It was actually published last September, and I've just picked out a few images from that. So what you can see here is some interesting infographics, which starts to bring that last map a bit to life. You know, what does this actually mean? So there's 6 key infographics here, and just to remind people, this is pre-pandemic. So we already had 8 of the 23 wards in Ealing, and the 20% most deprived in England. So, you know, that's a third. There's obviously lots of inequality in terms of our demographics as well. So employment rate for Ealing's women was 12% lower than men. And then there's obviously our ethnic residents as well had suffered inequality in employment. And we're a borough that doesn't really pay the London living wage compared to other London boroughs. I think we're close to the bottom of the league table in terms of London living wage, and that's something we're actively working on as well, particularly with Councillor Bassam Mafous, and we've got a manifesto pledge in there to actually treble that, I think, over the next 4 years. Overcrowded households, particularly in the Southwell area, and then some disadvantaged pupils in terms of attainment. So you can see here there's a rather bleak picture of pre-pandemic on the economy. And then what is the impact of COVID-19 been on our local economy? So soon after the pandemic struck, I think we were very, very quick to act in terms of commissioning further data in real time to figure out what's the living impact of this pandemic. So we commissioned a company called Oxford Economics. I think it was it was maybe April or May, so literally just after the pandemic struck. And we done that in collaboration with the other West London boroughs, so part of the West London Alliance. So you can see here that a lot of the job cuts, 50% of the job cuts that would, as a result of the pandemic, would be within just 3 sectors. So that's saying that Ealing's economy wasn't very resilient, and I guess more compared to some other London boroughs, the impact is more acute, because a less resilient economy will suffer more. A more diverse economy will suffer less. It's pretty obvious. And the reason our economy was found to be least resilient is because we had an over-reliance on Heathrow and the aviation sector. So many folk who live in Ealing worked at Heathrow, or many folk were working within the supply chain network jobs linked to Heathrow Airport. So that made our economy very unresilient. We had the second, and this played out in terms of furlough as well. So unemployment. So we had the second highest unemployment rate in West London. Southwell had the highest furlough rate, and that's certainly linked to Heathrow. You can see here that 75,000 jobs were to be lost across West London from the aviation sector, and yeah, quite a high jump in the numbers of people claiming support in Ealing as well. And this is something Angela would probably talk a bit more about if she was here. But yeah, again, so this is on top of the pre-existing pandemic issues. I'm painting quite a bleak picture here, but I think it's important that I do that, because then that will give you a sense of the quick actions we're putting in place to try and address some of this. But I think we have to start with this context. It's very important. So the plan for good jobs itself, it's a document that's very much grounded in the operation of the council and obviously the vision of the leader Peter Mason and his cabinet, in particular Councillor Monroe and Councillor Mafous. So what this does, we took the corporate plan, so creating good jobs, one of the key planks from that, and then we took that and said, right, how do we deliver that? So this plan for good jobs is essentially the action plan. And then that leads on to a number of key delivery tools or levers, if you want to call them that. So Councillor Monroe's already talked about Shaping Ealing. That's our local plan. which will have a very ambitious approach to how we regrow and rebalance our economy. We're also developing a brand new inward investment program. Some of you may be aware of Ealing in London, which was our old one, but it was very much focused on the development industry, so housing construction and things like that, which Ealing is rather successful at. We've built a lot of homes and we've exceeded our 2,500 genuinely affordable homes target. But I think we might have took our eye off the ball a little bit during that period. We were quite focused on homes, the delivery of homes, which is absolutely critical, obviously, but there's much more we can do to support the local economy, you know, so we're going to rebalance that inward investment program as well to look at that. And then the obvious outcomes here on the right, and you can see the vision there, you can read for yourself. In terms of the plan for good jobs itself, we wanted to keep something quite short, succinct, not something that's going to sit on the shelf. A document that's very easy to access, easy to understand, and easy to deliver. So the key thing being delivery. So it's about actions. So there's 4 overarching actions in here. So to focus on local people, it's particularly the hardest hit. We've got the support the businesses, particularly protecting and nurturing our existing businesses in Ealing. So that goes back to my point about Brompton. Focusing on our towns and communities, our most left behind towns and communities. So I guess I would probably categorize places like Northall, Perryville, who maybe haven't had as much good growth for investment over the last number of years. So we're focused on places like that, but also Southall. Even though Southall has had a lot of growth coming to it, you can still see it's quite deprived still. So still a lot of work to be done in those places too. And last but certainly not least is climate change action. I guess that could almost transcend everything. So 4 action areas, 12 objectives, and a whole raft of projects already on the delivery. Which I'm going to go into some of those projects now to actually give this a bit more of an upbeat discussion. So we've outlined the context and the issues we're looking at, but now there's some really interesting things that we're currently doing to improve the economy. This map here, I probably didn't need to put this in here, but this just shows the 7 town areas, plus we've got Park Royal, which is potentially the 8th one, but that's under the demise of OPDC. So we're going to talk about some things that we're doing here, and this language here is quite important because this is picking up the language that officers can read through a lot of the documentation coming out through the organization, particularly from a corporate level. So the manifesto commitments that are coming through, the new corporate plan that's going to be coming through, but also listening very carefully to Councillor Mason and other members as well. What sort of language are we talking about here, and how can you actually bring that into what we're trying to do here? So partnership, innovation, creativity, meanwhile, support, and public realm. So these things, each of these things in their own right will play a really big role in how we improve our local economy. But if you actually bring all these things together, they're much more than the sum of their parts. They can deliver really good outcomes. So I'm going to go through a few of these now. Partnership. This is just one example of a partnership I've picked out. So Open, Havelock and Southall. Look at that. Ealing, Catalyst, GLA, Canal and River Trust, like four big partners working together, delivering meanwhile community use in the Havelock estate. So taking 36 redundant garages and creating that as a community hub. So that's partnerships, and that's just one example. There's many other partnerships that are doing similar things across the borough as well. Innovation. So Brompton Factory, it's located in Greenford. You can see here Greenford Park. This is a large industrial estate owned by Segro. So we've got businesses, really interesting businesses in there, Brompton being one of them. We've got Vantage Power as well, which is one of the UK's leading battery manufacturers. So what we're trying to say is, okay, we've got these really interesting businesses in Greenford. How do we actually how can the council act as a platform to bring these businesses together, maybe create something quite special? So we think the ingredients for an innovation hub are there in Greenford, but it's up to us to bring it together as the council, and then let those people who own these businesses and deliver their products actually work together and do some really important things. So this is something we're looking at as well. Creative. So yeah, Ealing was one of 3 London boroughs to secure Creative Enterprise Zone status from the GLA. So after quite a competitive bidding process, we achieved this, and that's going to be in Norfolk and Park Royal. So that's already, Portugal is already the UK's largest industrial estate, 46,000 workers in there. That's it might even be more than that. And a lot of those, there's lots of clusters of creative and digital industries in there. So those industries have emerged, organically they've emerged on their own, and they're quite successful. But what we can do is, as the council, is actually work with them and actually enhance that even more. And the fact we're getting CZ status for this place is going to really put that place on the map even more. And it's going to lever other funding in from other different sources as well to really grow the local economy of Acton, and how those benefits will spread out to the rest of the borough as well. Meanwhile, so Southall Manor House, yeah, a fantastic asset in Southall, which we managed to get some money from the GLA on to enhance, and now we're going to open this in the summer as a business and community hub. So using our assets to actually create good outcomes for our residents and local businesses. So this is just one example of that. Councillor Croft has put his hand up now. Should I pause just for your question, Chair?
Can you?
You shouldn't. You should carry on. I'll
Keep going.
do
Okay.
questions at the end.
Good stuff. All right. Ealing's High Streets Task Force. This is something we also set up very quickly after the pandemic struck, bringing together all our bids, traders, multiple businesses, multiple offices from across different direct departments in the organisation that never really met each other before. This is a really good example of coming together. And we delivered some really good outcomes across our high streets in Ealing. And this High Streets Task Force will evolve further. And the chair of the High Street Task Force, Paul Martin, he's been telling me that other councils from different parts of the UK are actually looking at our model in Ealing as a good best practice one, and they want to replicate it. So
I just clarify, Conor, do you mean John Martin, not Paul Martin?
Sorry, John Martin. Yes, John Martin. Sorry.
Right.
Thanks for correcting me, Chair. Public realm. Again, public realm is critical for the economy, because if you've got a good public realm, it enhances civic pride. It makes people want to go to the town centres, and it makes people want to be in Ealing, want to come and work here as well, or set up a business here. Really quality public realm. This is going to be a huge step change for Norfolk. We secured over £7.2 million from the Levelling Up Fund to invest in active travel in Norfolk. And the fact Norfolk doesn't really have a very strong local economy at the moment, this is going to be a key ingredient to actually grow that local economy. And the local plan is going to have some really exciting things to say about Norfolk and how it can grow over the next few years. We were, by the way, only one of 3 London boroughs to get Levelling Up Fund. Very, very competitive process. Most of the money went up north, but we managed to get some in Ealing, so we done well there. So that's some of the interesting projects. Councillor Rose already talked about the local plan. The local plan is a huge lever for us in terms of how we rebalance and regrow our local economy, but it's more of a long-term lever. It takes a while to get the new local plan drafted. It takes a while to get it through the inspector and get it adopted, and then policies take a little while to impact on the development industry. But it's very important we get it right, and there's a lot of evidence based that Councillor Rose already mentioned feeding into that, particularly industrious Ealing, affordable workspace policies, and we're creating 7 town plans for each of the 7 towns in the borough, each with their own sort of bespoke economy approach. New investment model. I'll talk a bit about an inclusive economy strategy or an action plan as well. This is something we're also working on. So you can see here, there's multiple things we're working on.
Just to advise that it's quite cold in the chamber tonight, so speed up a bit. If you don't mind.
Sorry. Sorry. It's a bit, but my passion for this is coming through. Hopefully, that's fine. But shaping Ealing, yeah, I won't dwell on this. Councillor talked about quite a lot earlier. Big lever for us. These are some responses on shaping Ealing. We've got over 10,500 responses. So people are very engaged in this discussion already, very engaged. They want to help us build this new local economy. That I won't go into detail on this slide. It's a bit technical. New investment model. It's about bringing these 3 cohorts together: investors, businesses, landowners, developers, and communities at the very heart of that. So a brand new, more innovative model for investment. This is a bit of a busy slide, but there's a big difference between inclusive growth and inclusive economy. And I can share these slides around afterwards, but we need to focus on inclusive economy, because that's not about GVA and targets of how much money we make. And this is about outcomes for residents, outcomes for business, and making people more healthy and more happy. That's what a good economy should be doing. So sorry that took a little while, Chair, but I felt important to, you know, talk in detail about some of these things. But yeah, I'll pause there, and happy to take any questions in any of that. Thank you.
No, thank you, Conor. Apologies for interrupting that way.
I'll leave that slide up so people can read it while they're thinking of questions.
Yeah, no, sure. Thank you. I mean, look, this is an important, not just presentation, but the work that goes on. And I know just the conversation out at work today as well, very similar. And given where we are post-pandemic and the challenges there are, I know Councillor Munro, you know, has got an important role there in terms of making things better, basically, as we go forward. So any questions then? I've got Councillor Rice first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, because I've just wondered if we're doing any work with Ealing Food Bank, because I see today that they were tweeting about how Ealing is just using food banks far more than maybe other boroughs in West London, and they're actually getting to the stage where they just haven't got barely any food left on the shelves there. And so I'm just wondering really if we're doing work with them to actually understand about what the level of deprivation is about in Ealing. Is it more to do with unemployment, or is it just simply that the jobs that people do have are not paying enough? If we can identify what the real issues are, and maybe it'll help us in actually trying to solve those issues. And also, it's actually interesting because they're talking about the economy here and talking about climate change as well, which might just sound completely unrelated. But I'm just wondering what more we can do in order to look at our economy and look at climate change. When you talk about Brompton bikes, I never really heard of them before until the Deputy Mayor for Business, the Street Cards Deputy Mayor, came to Wheeling and mentioned about it. And now I'm hearing that not only is there just some thriving company in Greenford that I wasn't really that aware of, but actually they've got incredibly high number of employees. And if you're just looking at green jobs and the green economy, what more is there that we can do in order to promote what is basically green jobs, making bicycles, and what more is there that we can do in terms of the green economy generally in order to attract employers and companies here who might want to innovate and come up with green solutions. And also you mentioned about in my own ward of North Mandeville that we are benefiting from that levelling up fund and the 7.2 million. And some of the residents were asking questions about, well, what exactly is the use to them of having these cycle paths and cycleways. And I'm thinking in terms of the economy, well, it means that at long last, instead of having all these cars going down Mandeville Road, if people are actually on their bikes, and maybe they will actually stop and give some passing trade to our high streets. I am on the High Streets Task Force, as are a number of people here tonight, and maybe they will actually stop and give us some passing trade. That'd be quite of interest to us, because we need things like restaurants and cafes to thrive in North Alton. That's not going to happen unless people come and visit us. So I mean, there's a whole load that we can look at in terms of the green economy and how important that would be in looking at the future for Ealing. Thank you.
Conor, I mean, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I can respond. Thanks, Councillor Rice, for those really good questions. Yeah, the food bank, well, that's really important. I think there's a cost of living crisis happening right now, which is acute. So it's another layer on top of what I talked about earlier. So we and I think Angela's probably best placed to answer this, but I do know we're working with our voluntary community sector to make sure we can support them and make sure they're engaged in a lot of this work. So in-work poverty is a big problem in Ealing as well. So like, I think it's a big problem all over the UK, but in particular Ealing, because in Ealing, as I said earlier, the economy is not being resilient as other boroughs, and that's impacting on in-work poverty as well. And we've actually lost some of the more higher value jobs in the borough as well. So we want to retain those and bring them back. The idea of the green economy is really important as well. So we did work closely with Councillor Mafus on developing a circular economy. But what can a circular economy look like for Ealing? And we've got that now in the manifesto, and there's ongoing work around that as well. So watch this space on that one, councillors. That we'll have more to present on that at a later date. Brompton, yes, Brompton. Yeah, they've just been quietly working away in Greenford, but they're a huge business. And myself, Councillor Mason, and some other councillors actually went out to meet them recently as well, and we had to go on to Brompton and we've listened to their concerns and their issues, and we said, well, this is how we can help. We want to replicate that sort of conversation with all our businesses across Ealing. In Ealing, we've got over 40 businesses, large employers who pay over or employ over 250 employees. They're large employers, and we'll be meeting all of those over the coming months. So it's building that relationship between the council and those really important businesses. Yeah, there might have been other questions in there, but I think hopefully I've picked up the main ones.
Yeah, thank you, Conor. Let me make a confession here. After all these years, I actually did have a Brompton bike earlier in the year. I took up their subscription scheme.
Yeah.
Just doubted myself. But I've now returned that bike, but I'll get it again. Right, I'm going to take Dan Crawford online.
You don't have to, Chair, but I'm very grateful.
Right.
My hand was up and still is up. I'm going to take it down. If I need to declare that I too have a Brompton bike, I'll do so now, and it can be recorded as a declaration of interest. Just a couple of points on what was a really good presentation, Conor, and your passion for it came through massively, and that's great. There is potentially a bit of synergy between this item and the one we've just discussed in regards to the digital offer that we're looking to provide our young care leavers that was referenced in the previous presentation, when you were speaking about the partnership in the creative enterprise zone in North Acton with some of our digital businesses in Park Royal. I wonder if we could get some of those partners involved in some of the projects and the digital project that our young care leavers are looking at, with appropriate safeguarding in place. Of course, perhaps that's something we could explore. Just on the other question is around that creative enterprise zone and how we get the best out of the ODPC, delivering for us as well as its neighbouring boroughs and the local residents. I've spoken with Councillor Manro and other colleagues before, and I probably bored them to death on this point, that the OPDC is not as resident or indeed as councillor focused as it might be, down to the ward level, to the extent where we don't know that things are happening until the OPDC publicly announces their next tranche of investment into Acton. It'd be useful to try and build up some of those levers and use them more effectively in the thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Crawford. Yeah, keen to link up on the digital care levers, so I'll make an action and follow that up separately. Yeah, on the CEZ, yeah, there's a couple of things going on in Acton. CEZ is just one of the things, but there's also something called the Acton Vision and Framework. So that's also been led by my service as well, a lady called Catherine is leading that, and that's actually, I guess, filling that bit of a gap that you outlined, Councillor Crawford, in terms of Ealing being the best, we're best placed to actually really engage with our local businesses and local residents within the Acton area. I know OPDC are fine with that, and they support us on that, but we can do it best because we know our communities better than they do. So that work's ongoing as well. The CEZ itself, we're in the process of setting up the governance around the CEZ, and we want to ensure it's very collaborative and inclusive. So we'll invite not just local digital businesses onto the governance, but also local residents as well. So they can actually understand what this could mean for them and what sort of future jobs they might be able to get out of it. So yeah, watch this space on that one as well. I think we plan to launch the CEZ in the summer, so there'll be a big moment to do there as well.
Yeah, can I just Conor, just echo Councillor Crawford's point about OPDC? I mean, because it did cover it covered a lot of North Acton, which was part of my ward until next week. So yeah, better communication from their end would be useful to all of Acton councils, in fairness, as well as the new ward. Councillor Ball.
Yeah, so also on CEZ that Daniel touched on, I'm just confessing ignorance. Could you explain a bit about what the CEZ offers to businesses in that area? Because I'm not clear on how it actually works. And then the other question was about, is there anything that we can do to encourage micro businesses? So that's not in the context of CEZ right across the borough. It was one one of the things that annoyed me about the way that Ealing's COVID support scheme for businesses was structured was that it excluded the smallest businesses, smallest turnover businesses. And anyway, that's happened now. But is there anything we can do going forward to try to encourage the micro businesses, which there are a lot of in Ealing, but there could be even more if we encourage them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, on the CZ, it's Creative Enterprise Zone. So it's initiative led by the GLA, and I think an area that gets CZ accreditation or status, that it's really it doesn't, it's not the GLA giving money to these businesses or anything. It's almost promoting the area, and by promoting the area, that sort of wakens up many different other sectors or other investors or other people from other businesses that might want, oh, something very interesting happening in North Ackland, Port Royal, it's got a CZ. So that levers all that sort of private sector investment to come into that area, and also levers all that sort of innovation and creativity and other things to come into that area. So it's more about the fact you've just got that accreditation just opens up a whole load of new things. The actual CZ itself, we'll be setting up governance on it, and local businesses will be on the various boards or working groups, as well as residents. And it actually allows them to work together more as well. So maybe certain businesses didn't really know that the other ones were really nearby, and there's mutual benefits from them working together. So it's bringing it all together. CZ, that's the main output from it. Micro businesses, yes, Ealing's economy, we've got one of the highest percentages of micro businesses in the whole of the UK. I think 93% of our local economy is micro businesses. And that by what I mean by micro businesses in that context is businesses that employ less than 10 people. That also includes freelancers and self-employed and limited company directors and things like that. So quite a lot, and that's really good, because that shows Ealing's got a very creative economy and an entrepreneurial economy as well, because people are setting up their own businesses. So that's really good. What more can we do to support them? What we need to do to support them is we need to, going back to the inward investment program I talked about, actually providing them with a stronger voice on inward investment matters. So it's not just about the housing companies and the developers, but it's actually businesses, so they can have a voice with the council about what they need and what they want. But also the local plan will be developing affordable workspace policy. So that'll be providing more affordable spaces for these micro businesses to occupy. We're also, going back to the Southall example, we're actually looking at our various assets and creating sort of meanwhile hubs to allow local micro businesses to access those spaces in a flexible way and an affordable way. Those are more short-term levers we're working with at the moment. The local plan's a bit more of a long-term lever. But yeah, we've got business support program as well, which we'll enhance again next year. Which is it's one of the examples, and that one is training some of these micro businesses how to trade online. So we actually discovered quite a lot of micro businesses in Ealing that didn't really trade online very much, and with e-commerce now it's essentially do that. So we're actually training them to do that as well. So there's a whole raft of things we're doing at the moment, but we can do more. We can always do more. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've got 3 last speakers, and I'll take Councillor Kamar, Councillor Young, and then I'll ask Councillor Munro as well. So Councillor Kamar.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think Conor's aware of this, but on the High Street Task Force, we're in the process of identifying council-owned commercial and other properties. So there may be some that are, if there was one that could be available in each of the 7 town centres, then businesses, local businesses could, Ealing businesses, smaller businesses who've actually suffered and could do with that, they could actually partake and be part of the training and offer jobs to even the people, the young school leavers. And they, it would work both ways. It would help them carry on a business. It would be, much work would need to be done on this, but I think that would be something that really should be considered, because I'm sure that one little space in each town centre, there'll be businesses in that area who will, you'd be quite surprised who would come forward. But I shall bring it to the, Conor, I shall bring it to the High Street Task Force at the end of the month if I'm still around. But it's something that's, you know, ever since we've been trying to identify, or we got the list, I think it was at the last meeting. So there are dozens and dozens of premises that are just there. Even if it's, you know, a 6-month program, it could be something that could be trialed. But I thought that that should be considered. And I'm not sure, Chair, if we are on the High Street Task Force, that's not a declaration of interest, is it? Being on the High Street Task Force is not a, okay, okay. So no, I just wanted to make sure.
This is a pecuniary interest. I don't think anyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Kimmer. Yeah, please bring that to the next High Street Task Force. Also, there's some people may have seen this, but there's potentially an interesting initiative coming from central government to support our high streets a bit more, because vacant units sort of plague our high streets, and particularly long-standing ones. And we've developed a tool to identify all these vacant units and actually identify the landlords who own them, and actually reaching out to speak with these landlords. But in addition to that, I just found out the government's potentially going to penalise landlords who have long-standing vacant units, and if they're not occupied within a certain period of time, then effectively the local authority can take over them. So that's quite an interesting thing. We're going to keep a very close eye on as well to help with our high streets.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Young.
Is one of the reasons why Ealing's economy was one of the hardest hit economies in London is because we persisted with LTNs after the pandemic?
I don't know.
No,
that's not something, wasn't part of my remit to analyse the LTN's impact on the local economy. So
I thought we were going to go a whole year without any mention of LTNs. Honestly,
yeah.
The point that local issues do affect the local economy. There's another one that affects the local economy quite a lot, which is our planning system.
Yeah.
Suffering inordinate delays at the moment. I'm getting quite a few members' inquiries about planning applications which are not going through in a timely manner. I've had one that's gone on for over a year. If you want to do a development, if you're a business, if you're suffering delays like that, it markedly affects your work.
I mean, it's clearly a comment, given we've got elections about a week away, I suspect as well. The
second one's nothing to do with the election. It's just due to the delays we're suffering.
There are a number of factors that obviously affect impact of business, but Conor, do you want to talk to that?
About the planning system, and I can talk about the local plan. I can talk about the local plan and what its role will be, and obviously Councillor Monroe outlined that very well at the start.
What I'm going to do to help you, I'll ask Councillor Monroe to come to say a few words, maybe Councillor Young.
Sorry, I won't go into that. That's something that you could bring to my attention outside of this meeting if there is an issue with one individual application. But well, okay, you can bring that. What I was going to say is there, as part of our look at the economic regeneration of Ealing, we are moving towards a view that Ealing is no longer just going to be a commuter sort of city town where people get onto the trains and tubes and go into central London in the central economic zone. We believe that we have the ability to have jobs come back into Ealing. And that's really one of the key things we're looking at to try and rebalance the sort of economic investment coming into the borough. In the past, it was coming in terms of housing developments. We want to rebalance that towards bringing in businesses and offices, etc. So you may be aware that there are some large office applications coming into Ealing, which if somebody spends £200 million building 30,000 square meters of offices in central Ealing, that they're not going to do that unless they believe that they will be able to let those to companies, which may create anything up to, my understanding, about 4,500, 5,000 jobs into central Ealing. same in Southall, same in other places. So there is a rebalancing that we're looking at as after COVID to look at people working more locally. And I would rather have, I'd love to stand outside Ealing Broadway Station and see people coming into Ealing and going to the work rather than leaving Ealing and going into central London. So I think really, I just wanted to, give you an overview of what we're thinking in terms of trying to bring high, well-paid jobs into Ealing. And that's one of the manifesto commitments. But we have noticed as part of the Industrious Ealing study that we have been losing high-paid jobs in Ealing. And that's another issue that we are looking at to try and manage and bring well-paid jobs into Ealing. So I think there is an overview about how we manage this, how we bring offices and employment back into Ealing, rather than just housing. While housing is important and we have a big target, 4,000 generally affordable homes, we still need to bring jobs and employers back into Ealing. And that will be part of this plan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Brett, that is the last question then.
Yeah, so I'm asking this question with a kind of slightly vested interest, which is I'm probably one of the 93%, I think you said, Conor, of people that are in the kind of the microeconomy businesses. And whilst kind of I welcome that, and I'm sure lots of other people welcome some of the stuff that has been put in place or is about to be put in place, I think it kind of probably wouldn't go far enough. And I think there's probably quite a big gap between what's on offer and then also, the potential for growth. Some of these businesses may actually be able to expand, and they need that extra support from the council so that they, and most of them are local. They may be self-employed, or they may employ one or two other people. And there's potential for them to grow and start employing more and more people within the borough, and that's keeping money within the borough, jobs within the borough, and so I think that there's something there that kind of is a potential to tap into. So that's kind of one thing that I think is something that we should be looking at in the next couple of years. Thanks.
Yeah. That's a really, really good point, Councillor. And yeah, we're thinking about what more can we do, and there's always more that can be done. But one thing that we haven't done this yet, but we're thinking about it, where it's going to be part of our inward investment model. We're actually going to have a business brokerage scheme potentially. So those businesses you mentioned that might want to scale up, employ more people, we can actually help them identify larger premises within Ealing. That whether that be vacant premises on our high streets, or whether that be new commercial floor space that's coming down the pipeline from the new developments that are coming, like in places like Southall or Acton. So that doesn't exist at the moment, but that's something we're going to put in place, and that'll be hopefully a really good way of helping those micro businesses stay in Ealing and grow in Ealing. So just another thing to mention.
Thank you, Conor. All right, look, I think in general, there's a general agreement. I think everybody who wants to see success really overall in terms of the borough, in terms of business, and with respect to Councillor Young as well. I mean, obviously he's raised some issues, but you can't really explore tonight in detail. Hopefully next year's, panel, OSC and one of the panels where we're looking at this in greater detail. Councillor Mayors talk about the process for shaping Ealing, so there'll be opportunities there to talk to that, because I think we all want that outcome, the better outcome, in terms of where we are coming out of the pandemic, but also with the cost of living crisis that's going on at the moment. So I think that's so there's a lot to do, and we'll come back obviously in future years. I think specific problems, I think by all means take it up with Councillor Munro and Conor outside the meeting, I think, because we can't resolve them tonight, but I think the general thrust is we're supportive of some of the ideas here. So anyway, with that, the recommendations are on the report on the cover page. So are we happy to note those recommendations as they are listed on the report? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Conor. Sorry, got you.
Thank you, everybody.
I had a comment on the recommendations and, the businesses and other, is there something that we could put in about the bailiffs? That's actually something that's come up quite a lot. That's also for people, for the residents and also for businesses, because I think it's just escalated a little bit and it's brought, a lot of fear into people's minds. Is that something that we can touch on? I know each case will be individual and people can make arrangements to pay their council tax or whatever, but to have a bailiff turned up, that actually makes life even more difficult because they'll end up homeless or, and then the council has to look for accommodation. Something on the bailiffs. I couldn't quite, sort of form sort of a topic or a recommendation on how to phrase it, but it's something that perhaps could be touched on if possible.
Probably not. We've had the conversation, the debate, I think partly the recommendation was about business, but I do take the point you're raising. I think but we were talking about businesses rather than necessarily residential alone. But okay, I just don't want to reopen the conversation in terms of report. But I think Conor's still there. So you're now on our screen, Conor. Maybe contact Conor actually with suggestions as well, and Councillor Munro, I think. But do take it up one of the panels next year as well. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Yeah. Sorry to be dismissive. We want to move on. The last item we've got then is on item 7 on the approach to scrutiny in 2022-23. Before I bring Sam, just to let me just introduce it. What I will say, this has been a transitional year this year, given we've had new leadership in place as well. So this has meant getting to grips with some of the new dynamics, relationships, and that direction of travel administration, and for us to review how scrutiny is operated whilst ensuring some of those key issues have been discussed. And over the last year, we've covered the budget, the safer communities. We had a robust meeting last time with the police and the fire brigade, environmental crime, inequalities in the workforce, council plan, of course, tonight, economic growth as well. So this last year, we've sought to develop that policy overview role whilst enabling cabinet members to set out their thoughts and ideas. And I want to we've looked to hopefully develop more pre-scrutiny next year, obviously, rather than just some of the one-off meetings as we go forward. Anyway, the start of the new municipal cycle, for those who do come back, represents an opportunity to review how we do things and change to a different structural approach to scrutiny, which is why this paper is subject to members' agreement tonight. We've aligned the work and the panel themes to some of the key 6 key priorities of the anticipated winning manifesto. Now, this will give the panels a focus to deliver more timely recommendations rather than the traditional method of recommendations at the end of the year in just one area. And I think it will offer a greater accountability of the administration and enable members to contribute more towards the council's ambitions. The panel membership itself will determine what items they want to consider at each of the panels. And I would say with more new members expected next year, after next week, this will present an opportunity to use their skills and experience to help further the ambitions for the council going forward. So I know in terms of the work plan, some suggestions for these items presented in the draft work plans, and we're not necessarily agreeing those itself tonight. It's more the panel setup is what we're looking at. There will be some additional work required by the panel and the committee chairs as we look to establish some quarterly coordination meetings that will help avoid some duplication and ensure senior officers have a clear idea what our expectations will be for reports. And I'm committing, and I think it's in the report, to review of that scrutiny process to ensure its relevance and engagement for members. I mean, I know I'm working in local government, there are different models in different councils, but I think for us, it's about making sure scrutiny works, making sure it's relevant and making sure it has that equal role on the council for all members. Obviously, that will all happen subject to what happens next week. So Sam, do you want anything else?
Nothing further to add, Chair. You've taken the wind out of my sails, so to speak. I was going to go through it all, but I think you've covered everything really. If it's okay with you, I'll open it to questions from members if they want to question the report in great detail. Happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Woodruff.
I just have, I won't be involved in it, but I think Scrutiny, I was one of the first Scrutiny chairs along with Councillor Young many years ago. It seems to me that each panel does quite big, extensive reports, a huge amount of research, and it's cross-party. And they tend to get lost in the ether about, the last 2 or 3. I just wondered if it's possible to have a bit on the website, a portal where you could just have a look at scrutiny reports, not without having to look through all the meetings. I mean, currently you have to go through all the meetings and that, whether it's possible somebody could just sort of look into just having a sort of bit where you just says scrutiny reports for the last 10 years or something that you can have a look, because I think a lot of valuable stuff goes, and particularly with new members, they can have a look back. Somebody says something on this particular subject, and they can. I just wanted to have a look through it. That's just my parting comment.
Yeah, can certainly look into that. I know the web team are particularly keen on us not duplicating things up at the website, but as you will no doubt have seen last week, we've launched a new committee management system, modern.gov. We have a lot more control over what we host there, what we put there, how we present that as well. So I will have a look into that for you and see if there's an easy way of getting a list of all the previous panel reports in one place, so you don't have to go through. It might be actually, once I've checked on the site, that actually it's easier to find those in one place as well now with the different layout of the site, but I'll have a look into it. I'm grateful for the feedback, and I'll see if I can incorporate that in what we're doing with the new system.
Councillor Young.
I'm not quite sure what's being suggested as the new structure of scrutiny yet. You're talking about moving the focus away from having 4 scrutiny review panels. And there's no reason why there should be 4 scrutiny review panels. We've had different models in the past. But one of the things we have found is if you don't have a task and finish group, it doesn't finish. And it keeps on drifting on and asking for further reports and further reports and further reports, and never gives any value back into the council. So whatever model you do adopt, it's got to be one that has some sort of finite block on the proceedings of the committee. It's got to be one that's got a focus on value for money, or value in return for the work that we do. Where do we add value into the discussions that we're having? It's all well and good saying, oh, this is a good thing we're doing, we ought to encourage it. But if it doesn't change anything, if we're not making a difference, there's no point in being here.
Totally agree. And I think for me, scrutiny it's about having there's a number of different ways you can do scrutiny, and I think we've too far heavily, in recent years, too heavily relied on the sort of, scrutiny review panel model, and it's about just rebalancing that, not checking out the baby with the bathwater. I think we should still have some of these, the site visits and some of the time limited inquiries into certain subjects, but we also need to incorporate things like pre-decision scrutiny, which again adds value by dealing with issues before they become a problem, hopefully, anticipating things that perhaps if we don't take things cross party early on, we might end up with issues further on down the line, etc.
Can you also include in that post-decision scrutiny?
Yeah, and
not the eyes, but it's sometimes worthwhile looking at decisions of cabinet, see whether the outcome is what was predicted. We've had one or two quite exciting and interesting examples of that.
Measuring performance of things is certainly part of adding value, and scrutinising that kind of scrutinising that performance and holding cabinet members to account as well is all, they're all important parts of scrutiny. What I'm saying is we need to make sure that we've got a balance where we've got a mixture of everything in there, rather than leaning too heavily on one model, which I think we've done in the last few years.
Okay, I'm going to bring Dan Crawford in and then John at the end.
Thank you, Chair. Just two comments on that. Firstly, I don't think I think value for money is incumbent in all of our scrutiny panels. To answer Councillor Young's point about that, it certainly should be. Certainly has been on every panel that I've been involved in, and it's very easy to fix if it's not. You just stick it in the terms of reference of each panel that they scrutinise everything for value for money. And this idea that our panels won't be term limited or won't know when they finish or overhang for another year, I mean, that's very simple. I think the chair and the senior scrutiny officer there have committed to reviewing how this proposed new setup looks following a year's worth of work, if I'm not mistaken. And I do think it's time we innovate in terms of our scrutiny, to be a bit more nimble and to react to what residents and colleagues have told us about how things are working at present. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's place for a place for trying a different method and going, I suppose, really back to what we had many years ago of having kind of scrutiny panels that covered a broad thematic area, and so you would be discussing things within that section. I mean, it's what many years ago we had effectively that sort of structure, didn't we? Yeah, effectively it's having a series of standing panels in some ways, isn't it? I think the problem with that was eventually we kind of ran out of things to look at within each area, rather. So I guess Daniel already mentioned 23-20. I guess the issue is what we do in 23-24. So whether this is a one-year thing, which seems quite sensible, or whether we think it makes sense to carry on with it for longer, in which case we might kind of run out of ideas for some of the panels. But I think it's absolutely fine to do it for 1 year and see how it goes.
Sure. I would say maybe read the Labour's manifesto. There's quite a lot of pledges in there, but actually, I mean, just on the business thing alone, there's quite a lot you can explore for looking at items through one of the panels. You know, you've got, I think, 3-4 meetings a year, so you can cover quite a lot, I think, because just the themes alone, they're not going to be a cost of living crisis, not going to end in 12 months, for example. So there is potential there. I think that's it. There's no more questions. Are we happy to take the recommendations set out? See how it goes next year. But we want to make it to work, scrutiny to work. I think that's the important thing, and that's what we're recommending. So thank you for that. All right. Next item seems a bit odd, really. Anyway, date of next meeting we have got 7th of July 2022. It's the week I like to have off normally. Not had in about 2 years. But before we finish, can I just thank each and every member of the committee tonight and online as well for their contributions to the work of the committee. I just want a couple of highlights, which is the focus we gave, I think, particularly around inequalities. In the end, the last meeting we had in holding the police particularly accountable, I think, was important work, and that's a good example of scrutiny, or certainly OSC's work, you know, in action. And can I also thank the chairs of the different panels? I've got Councillor Block in the room and Councillor Rice, Councillor Crawford's on screen is Councillor Sarah Anjum. I don't know if she's still there, and Councillor John Ball as well, of course. So thank you very much for your work this year. And so can I also may wish those who would definitely not be returning after next week the very best. And good luck to the rest of us who are hoping to return after next week. And look as you're poised to ask something, Councillor.
Yes, I think we ought to thank you as well for your efficient and the courteous handling of the chairmanship.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right.